and ignored by Westerners as far back as history can take us. The black nations of antiquity, through the cultivation of the science of inducing the state of waking trance, which enables man to perceive the working of abstract principles and the hidden shaping forces of the world, were able to create a way of life systems of religion, science, philosophy, government, and economics, etc., that was capable of establishing and maintaining unity, and thus led to the creation of civilization. Unity, harmony, and order in society cannot be achieved through the making of laws by man and the policing of people's behavior.
Connected to iPhone.
But first, I want to give a background on the person who exposed the Illuminati's preparations for World War III and how they plan to use Islam to destroy the West. A secret diary was released by a man with information about elitist organizations and the New World Order. This diary documents that the Illuminati already knows what is going to happen for World War III. It's already mapped out. The agenda's already set. The diary that exposes this agenda belonged to a man named William Carr, who was born in 1895. Carr entered into Canada's Royal Navy at a very young age and ascended to the position of commander. He knew many at the top of their fields in politics and law and in academia. His side hobby was writing books, specifically books on the New World Order. His books documented the breadth in which the Illuminati had taken over all aspects of society, including churches and seminaries. In fact, Carr claimed to have received an SOS letter from a high-ranking official in the Roman Catholic Church in November 1958. The letter outlined a hostile takeover that was underway in the Vatican, the Illuminati having infiltrated the Vatican's quarters. Carr would die less than a year after receiving the SOS message. Carr also documented history behind the most elusive organization in world history, the Illuminati, and their religion, which is Luciferianism. He believed that modern organizations, including the Bilderberg Group and the Council on Foreign Relations, are Luciferian political organizations. He also believed that the chief governing body for Lucifer, for the ascension of the capstone, was the United Nations, and he documented this in his books. Carr wrote several books. His most controversial book was published after his death. It is called Satan, Prince of this World, and is really nothing more than Carr's personal diary and notes he saved for many years. In this book, Carr documents receiving the SOS letter from the high-ranking Vatican official, but he also documents other interesting things. For example, Carr believed that secret societies weren't working independently of one another, but that they were controlled by a top-level organization called the World Revolutionary Movement. And that's literally in his book, Satan, Prince of the World. This organization at the top tier is interested in inciting war, terrorism, and distress to serve its fundamental interests. And that is to establish the New World Order, a Luciferian system of governance and religion. Carr speaks at length about World War III in his book, Satan, Prince of the World. He documents that World War III was planned by a 33rd degree Grand Wizard named Albert Pike. Albert Pike was a notorious Luciferian who openly praised Lucifer in his book Moral and Dogma of the Ancient and Accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. Pike was also a general for the Confederacy during the Civil War and a wizard of occult magic, channeling and summoning of spirits. William Carr documented that Albert Pike wrote a letter to a friend in 1871 outlining the final and largest of the wars. According to Carr, what Albert Pike actually wrote was a lot more than a letter. It was a blueprint that spelled out exactly what would happen in the last war. Carr said, quote, "In the 1860s, Albert Pike is recorded as saying his military program might take 100 years or a little longer to reach the day when those who direct the conspiracy at the top will crown their leader king despot of the entire world and impose a Luciferian totalitarian dictatorship upon what is left of the human race." That's what they're saying. Pike seems to indicate a conspiracy to start a war so that the Antichrist can ascend to his position as world ruler. Pike's letter ironically also detailed the specifics of the first two wars with stunning accuracy, suggesting that he knew before time the details surrounding each of the wars. World War I, according to Pike, would be fought to overthrow the czars in Russia and change Russia into a communist state. The Second World War would be fought for two reasons: to establish the State of Israel and to expand communist control over Europe. The Third World War will be what allows the Novus Ordo Seclorum to rise out of the dust. According to Pike, Islam will be the central factor in the downfall of the West. Islam will be decimated in the process, allowing for the new religion of pure Luciferianism to spread on the earth. All Muslims will fall for this system. There isn't a single Muslim on earth who will not partake in the religion of the New World Order, according to Pike. Islam is merely a tool to destroy the Christian West. That's it. That's all it is. It's a tool. That's what they said hundreds of years ago. The master plan to use Islam was kicked off in 2001 when the fear of Americans was taken advantage of by an esoteric cabal lurking in the shadows.
Do you not think an angel rides in the whirlwind?
In his inaugural address, George W. Bush proclaimed that an angel would ride the whirlwind and direct the storm. The master plan was unveiled in 2001 for World War III. They started Albert Pike's blueprint when they flew 2 planes into the World Trade Centers and blamed it on Islam. The storm that would come and the angel that would bring it were long-awaited prophetic fulfillments. And as Albert Pike, Grand Wizard of the craft, had predicted, Islam would be the choice religion to use to foment a crisis between it and the West that would only get worse. What is the common factor? Every time you see a crisis, who's behind it? Islam. And they want you to believe it's organically an issue of Islam. This was planned hundreds of years ago, and they have quite a plan for Islam. The esoteric cabal is using Islam to achieve the great work. It's all been mapped out. We've seen what they're doing with the migrant crisis. We've seen what they've done in England with the Sharia courts, and on and on and on. They're using Islam to stir the pot. The system has to come down. It has to topple. Islam will be used for the ultimate goal, and that is to fully usher in the Luciferian capstone. They're going to keep using it to destroy Western Christianity, Western culture. It's going to happen, and there's really nothing you can do about it except to pray. That's it. That's what we're called to do. It's been predicted. They've known about this since at least the late 1800s. And even earlier than that, I think. All world wars have been mapped out. The third and the last one was already written in the books. You have no control over this. This is a battle between principalities and powers and dominions. And that is why our brother Paul told us to pray and to go to war against those principalities and powers.
From the ashes of their world, we'll build a better one.
Do you not think an angel rides in the whirlwind and directs this storm?
Out of these troubled times, our 5th objective, a new world order can emerge, a new era, freer from the threat of terror.
This work continues. The story goes on. And an angel still rides in the whirlwind and directs this storm.
A world where the United Nations, freed from Cold War stalemate, is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders.
What up, guys?
You may have heard of the likes of Christopher Columbus, Marco Polo, Ferdinand Magellan, Hernan Cortez, Amerigo Vespucci, and Francisco Pizarro. But my story, the story of an African explorer, navigator, and voyager to the Americas before all those aforementioned, must be told. I am Mansa Abubakar Keita II, the ninth Mansa, King of Kings, of the Mali Empire, founded by my grandfather Sundiata Keita. As a boy growing up in the royal court of the Keita dynasty of the Mali Empire, my younger brother Musa and I were privileged to receive the finest education. Coming up, we heard stories about lands across the Atlantic Ocean. While I would often dream of traveling west to sail off into the massive ocean, my brother Musa dreamed of traveling east to make pilgrimage to Mecca. While studying at Sankore University, I encountered maps from Muslim geographers, Moorish navigators, and scholars from Timbuktu, who had concluded that the Atlantic Ocean waters which washed the western end of Mali was not the end of the world. Diplomats from Morocco, North Africa, and scholars from the University of Timbuktu promoted new ideas about a spherical-shaped globe and worlds beyond the sea. While at Sankore University, I studied ocean currents, navigational charts, and learned how to navigate using the stars. I heard amazing tales of people from Western Sudan who ventured across the Atlantic Ocean some 2,000 years earlier. In the year 1310 AD, in the city of Niani, on the left bank of the Sankarini River, I ascended to the throne, and was inaugurated as the ninth Mansa of the Mali Empire. The time had come. I now had the resources at my disposal to realize my transoceanic ambition. I decided to use all my power and wealth to realize the dream that I had since my childhood. The Mali Empire had been extended down along the Gambia River to the ocean. I was master of the largest empire in the world, larger than the Arabs and larger than the Holy Roman Empire. I wanted to do something different with my regency, something new, something for which there was no precedent. The idea of making pilgrimage to Mecca bored me. I was bored by men who only discussed religion and repeated themselves endlessly. I surrounded myself with people of like minds, scientists, astronomers, navigators, and scholars of Timbuktu who entertained theories of a sphere-shaped world and dreamed of lands beyond the waters, as men in the 21st century now dream of life on worlds beyond the stars. I would spare no expense to build a fleet. I sent the announcement to let it be known throughout Mali and beyond. To all those who fished and sailed in lakes and rivers and off the sea's great coasts, to all those who know about boats and water currents and wind currents and direction finding by the map of the stars. To all those who know about marine engineering and nautical sciences. Let the Samano people come forward, to whom Sundiata had given the monopoly of the water. Let the Bozo people come forward, who are known as great boatmen of the Niger River. Call unto the boatmen of the Gambia and Senegal rivers. Call unto the people of Lake Chad, where it was said that men still built boats on the principles of the ancient Egyptians. Let it be known that they were all needed at the royal court of the Mali Empire. Great debate arose as to what kind of ships should be built. Some of my advisors said the ships should most certainly carry a sail. Other advisors said that the ships should not depend on a sail, saying that they could be stalled for days on the sea if there was no wind. Some advised that the ships that we built should be like the ships the Bantu and Arabs of East Africa were using on the Indian Ocean, which could change from sail to oar, and from oar to sail, so that it would have the double advantage of wind power and muscle power. Some advisors said it was pointless to call on the experience of the river people because the ocean to the west was no river, and it did not behave like an inland lake or stream. Some advisors said that we would have to build something truly massive to meet the monstrous moods of the ocean, and rivercraft would simply be dashed to pieces. Other advisors said big ships sank more easily on stormy water than small ones because they set up too much resistance to the wind and waves. I listened to all the hypotheses, theories, and opinions, but I took no chances. I decided that there would be no single design, no one kind of boat. I gave my blessings to all designs that seemed practical. I was not going to gamble on one man's theory and ignore the rest. We would use the scientific method and experimentation to end the debate and determine which idea was correct. I saw the configuration of my fleet like the political configuration of Mali. I stood at the helm as the central and unifying authority of the most diverse crew of elements on the Sudanic deck of the world. We began the great boat building operations along the Senegambia seacoast of Mali. Troops were withdrawn from wars and from other minor campaigns to focus their energies on this ambitious shipbuilding campaign. Blacksmiths, carpenters, boat captains, magicians, diviners, scholars from Timbuktu, gold merchants, potters, porters, weavers and jewelers were all assembled to contribute to the shipbuilding effort. Caravan guides, who used the compass and navigational instruments to plot their paths across the sandy sea of the Sahara, were called upon to serve as navigators across the ocean waters of the Atlantic. While the building of the boats progressed, a number of megalith structures were erected, stone observatories, such as ancient seafaring nations used for astronomical calculations, the ruins of which survive today as indications of the science of that time and the activities of that place. I specified that each boat built for the ocean voyage should be accompanied by a supply boat, which stored gold and other items for trade, along with enough food to last its company for at least 2 years. 200 master boats and 200 supply boats were built. As the task neared completion, I encamped on the seacoast to watch the final stages of the operation. It was the scene an Egyptian pharaoh must have witnessed during the erection of a pyramid. I felt pride at the thought that I was the only king in the world at that time who was wealthy enough and at peace enough to divert such a vast labor force from military and agrarian duties to a scientific exploration. The fleet of 200 ships departed in the year 1310 AD. When the ships departed, their absence was long, and I could not find peace. I was obsessed to learn of the outcome of the expedition that I had hurled across the spaces of the ocean. I could think of nothing else. Early one morning the following year, a captain of one of the ships had returned, and was waiting outside the gates of the palace to talk to me. The captain of the boat said that they sailed for a long while, until they came to what seemed to be a strong current flowing in the open ocean. The other ships sailed on, but as they came to that strong current they were swiftly pulled out over the horizon of the ocean until they disappeared. The captain said that he did not know what became of the ships because the waters were strong and swift and he was afraid and turned back and did not enter the current. This news made me more fixed in my obsession. Some said I even bordered on madness. I went with my royal court to the plain at the western edge of Mali where the first fleet had been built and had disembarked. Like the pyramid builders of dynastic Egypt, I began to recognize my whole empire around a single massive project. I assembled a vast army of craftsmen. I scaled up the shipbuilding operation, this time to send a massive armada of 2,000 ships to explore across the ocean. Paired men and women were being chosen for the new expedition, and fears were expressed by my subjects that in my madness I would sacrifice hundreds of my people to the voyage across the ocean. But I was unwavering. I never looked back. I stayed amongst the shipbuilders and never returned to the royal court at Niani. This time I wanted to lead the expedition myself. I had a special boat built for myself, with a throne on the stern deck, shaded by the vert emblazoned parasol. I would commandeer the fleet by means of the talking drum. In the year 1311 AD, I abdicated the throne, and conferred the power of the regency to my brother Kankan Mansa Musa, on the understanding that he was to assume the throne if, after a reasonable lapse of time, I did not return. My brother Kankan Mansa Musa told me that if he did succeed to the throne after me, he would choose his way to make his mark upon the world, to lead a massive train of caravans traveling east across the desert on a pilgrimage to Mecca. Then one day, in the year 1311 AD, dressed in a flowing white robe and a jeweled turban, I took leave of Mali. I gave up the throne in the name of science and discovery, and set out with my fleet to travel west across the Atlantic Ocean, never to return to Mali. In the year 1312 AD, we landed and settled on the coast of present-day Brazil in a place known as Recife. The other name we gave the site was Pernambuco, which comes from Borbambuco, the Mandi name for the rich gold fields that accounted for much of the wealth of the Mali Empire. We named other cities with Mandi names in the area we settled in, including Mandinga Port, Mandinga Bay, and Sierra de Mali. This was a West African colony in the Americas established by the 2,200 ships which disembarked from the Mali Empire under my rule. The European explorer, Christopher Columbus, even made mention of the African presence in the Americas in his logs. Columbus stated that the purpose of his third voyage was to test the claims of King John II of Portugal, that canoes had been found which set out from the coast of West Africa and sailed to the Americas. Columbus also stated he heard claims of the native inhabitants of the Caribbean island of Hispaniola, that black people had come from the southeast who were trading with spears that were made of a gold metal alloy developed in West Africa. Columbus's son, Ferdinand, said his father told him that he had seen black people north of what is now Honduras. The scholarly art historian, Count Alexander von Ludendorff, also discusses 14th century carvings and sculptures that were found in the Americas which show women and men wearing turbans, clearly African with tribal marks cut on their cheeks, indicating that the people came from Mali. We Africans arrived in the Americas long before Columbus. 3 currents can carry Africans to the Americas, 1 current off the Cape Verde Islands, 1 current off the Senegambia coast, and 1 current off the southern coast of Africa. We Africans were the first to navigate the ocean waters, and the science of astronavigation is the means by which we explored the 4 corners of the world. We navigated the 7 seas, by way of the 7 heavens.
King, what up? What up, yo? Yo, Green Life. What it do, bruh? Thanks for stopping by, man.
When Islam reached West Africa in the 8th century, Muslim historians began to write about West Africa as it spread throughout the area. Documents about the history of this region show Arab historians knew it.
Yeah, man, some Musa, man. Everybody know, man. The Musas was the shit, yo. I'm telling you, you goddamn
the empires of
Ghana, Timbuktu, Mali, Nigeria, Algeria, goddamn Egypt, Ethiopia, Somalia, motherfucking Zimbabwe, Sudan. Come on, man, motherfucking ain't too much history out there. And then you look at the history books in America. When they talk about ancient American civilizations, they say Aztecs, Incas, Mayans, but they don't like to throw the Olmecs up in there, because the Olmecs look African. The fucking art and the sculptures that the Olmecs left behind are African. And they, in the Aztecs say, they get their culture from the Olmecs. And the Olmecs say they people came from the east in the direction that the sun rises across the water. They came before Columbus, man. And then like for a long time, like the slave trade story, people talking, oh, that story is not really true. All the slaves ain't come from Africa, this and that. But then when you start to read more into this shit, man, it's like we was already here. You know what I'm saying? It was blacks already here, yo. And a lot of those blacks were captured as slaves and didn't even come from Africa through the slave trade. Yeah. That's our love history, man.
Mali, Songhai, Timbuktu, and Gao became the first sub-Saharan people to accept Islam, early as 850 AD. Commercial centers provided the first places of worship, as traders began to have prayer areas in the towns. These centers of trade invariably became symbols of African civilization, showcasing an Islamic learning dynasty. The community was governed under the Islamic Sharia system, and scholars began gathering to share vast resources of knowledge. Al-Bakri, the Muslim geographer, provides an early account of ancient Ghana in his book, Roads and Kingdoms. He describes Ghana of 1068 as highly advanced. Al-Bakri writes, economically, it was a prosperous country. The king had employed Muslim interpreters, and most of his ministers and treasurers were also Muslims. The Muslim ministers were learned enough to record events in Arabic and corresponded on behalf of the king with other rulers. He gives the following picture of Islam in Ghana during that time. The city of Ghana consists of 2 towns lying on a plain, one of which is inhabited by Muslims and is large, possessing 12 mosques, one of which is a congregational mosque for Friday prayers. West African griots tell the story of a woman named Bucktu who settled near the banks of the Niger early in the 11th century. She maintained a water well which became a social center and stopping place for caravans of travelers. A village was formed which was later named Timbuktu. A supreme judge named Sheikh Sidi Abu al-Barakat Mahmud, who had visited Mecca and Cairo, ordered that a mosque be built. With the financial backing of a wealthy Mandekan woman, they designed a mosque featuring an inner court with the exact dimensions of the Kaaba in Mecca. It would become a leading center of education. Timbuktu had long been a destination or stop for merchants from the Middle East and North Africa. It wasn't long before ideas as well as merchandise began passing through the fabled city. Since most, if not all, these traders were Muslim, the mosque would see visitors constantly. The temple accumulated a wealth of books from throughout the Muslim world, becoming not only a center of worship, but a center of learning. Books became more valuable than any other commodity in the city, and private libraries sprouted up in the homes of local scholars. In addition to books, Timbuktu accumulated navigational maps and logs from geographers throughout the world. During the 10th century, stories began to surface of sailors reaching a distant land. One of the first accounts came from a 10th century historian named Ali al-Masudi. An accomplished geographer, philosopher, and natural scientist, he wrote a book called In the Meadows of Gold and Quarries of Jewels. In it, he tells the story of a young man from Spain named Kashkash ibn Said, who crossed the Atlantic Ocean, made contact with people on the other side, and returned in the year 889 AD. Al-Masudi wrote, Kashkash gathered a group of young men and went on a voyage on this ocean. He returned with a fabulous booty. Every Spaniard knew his story. By the 12th century, the world's best-known geographer, Muhammad al-Idrisi, was also telling stories of sailors crossing the Atlantic. Al-Idrisi had created the most accurate map of the world in pre-modern time. His book, The Delight of Him Who Desires to Journey Through the Climates, is a geographical encyclopedia containing detailed maps and information on European countries, Africa, and Asia.
There were many people who said, what a fantastic thing, what a ridiculous thing, what a stupid thing to think that a few 100,000 people like this can defy not only Britain, but really the United Nations and the rest of the world, and get away with it. What a nerve. Who do they think they are? Well, you know, ladies and gentlemen,
y'all right about that, yo. The Muslims spread that shit hard and fast, yo. And when you think about it, like how did Christianity gain such a foothold when Islam was the fucking shit, yo, for centuries, yo? The Muslims came down into Northern Africa and into West Africa and started spreading all that shit, and had motherfucking African kings taking up fucking Muslim names and shit. And like you say, the three main epicenters of the world was mostly Islamic. Chris, what up, yo?
We have won.
By 1964, independence under black rule had been conceded for all Britain's African colonies, except one. In southern Rhodesia, 200,000 white settlers still ruled the colony's 3 million blacks, and were determined to keep it that way. To protect their lifestyle, the most luxurious in Africa, they chose a new prime minister with instructions to fight any British move which threatened white control.
The era of civilized control in southern Rhodesia isn't estimated in a period of 2 years, as some people have tried to. We don't even stretch the era of civilization in southern Rhodesia to 100 years. As far as we are concerned, it has got to be for all time. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, that means only one thing: independence.
I went and saw them in 1964 and was frankly horrified. Ian Smith and his cabinet seemed to me to be like a set of white ostriches. Nothing that I or Harold Wilson or anybody else said to them made the slightest difference. I said they'd got minds like Polaroid sunglasses. Only welcome information penetrated. Anything unwelcome simply didn't get through.
Smith refused independence on his terms, resolved to seize it by a unilateral declaration of independence. His security advisors told him UDI would be too dangerous. In October 1965, he called them to a meeting.
Ian Smith in the chair said that it now had to be a political decision. His colleagues would make that decision. We were all to prepare for UDI, but await a favorable opportunity for its implementation. That opportunity came surprisingly within a couple of weeks.
The British Prime Minister arrived in Salisbury, desperate to find some compromise to avoid UDI. But Smith rejected any plan that might lead to majority rule. The African leaders looked to Britain to stop Smith, if necessary, by force.
I've had to tell them that their demand for Britain to attempt to settle all Rhodesia's constitutional problems with a military invasion. This demand is out. And if there are those in this country who are thinking in terms of a thunderbolt hurtling from the sky and destroying their enemies, a thunderbolt in the shape of the Royal Air Force, let me say that thunderbolt will not be coming.
I think it was insane. I simply cannot understand the Prime Minister letting Ian Smith know that we wouldn't intervene by force, because in a situation where you've so few cards in your hand, you mustn't tell the other side that you have no cards.
This, in effect, gave the Rhodesian government their opportunity. Because if I remember, it was within a matter of hours that the Rhodesian cabinet met on the 1st of November and confirmed the decision to go for UDI.
The following message was sent today from the Prime Minister. I remind everyone in the services that first and foremost he is the servant of Rhodesia, his country, and of its government. The British government will not hesitate to employ every device, legal or otherwise, that occurred to them to sow doubts in the minds of civil servants, members of the armed forces and of the prison service, and to detach these services from their loyalty to the government and to Rhodesia itself.
Only Rhodesia could have dared a UDI. In other colonies, the British authorities could quell a settler rebellion, but Rhodesia was unique. They had their own police, civil service, and armed forces under the settlers' control. The only way Britain could stop UDI was by military invasion. But Harold Wilson had a parliamentary majority of only one, and a general election was coming. He feared the reaction of his electorate. An invasion could lead to a long and bloody war with their Rhodesian kith and kin. He asked his civil servants to come up with something else.
We civil servants sat in our bath, and the only thing we could come up with was some middle course between the extreme of doing nothing, which Harold Wilson obviously wouldn't have, and the extreme of using force, unacceptable for many reasons. So all we could think of in the middle was economic sanctions.
We believed it right from the beginning that sanctions were a farce and that they're not going to work.
Joshua Nkomo, the father of Zimbabwe nationalism, had long been fighting for African rights. He had been rounded up along with the other nationalist leaders. The Smith regime kept them in detention for the next 10 years.
Sitting in detention in our camps in Guanakudzingwa, where the railway line passed a few meters away from our gate, we could see the tankers go past from Lorenzo Max. And as we had said to Mr. Wilson when he said the sanctions were the trump card, and we said we did not believe the insufficient trump card when Wilson himself had said nothing was going to be done to any petroleum products coming from South Africa.
We were worried for, I suppose, a month or so, uncertain. But nothing terrible happened. In fact, it was a little better than we had expected, you see. And then it gradually got better, not worse. We became industrially self-sufficient. We developed a much broader base to our whole economy and our industry. It was a shot in the arm.
Sanctions failed to bring the rebels to their knees. Black Commonwealth leaders demanded action. Wilson, still determined not to use force, pursued Smith on land and on sea. He pleaded with him to promise the blacks majority rule, so Britain could recognize white Rhodesia's independence and shed this thankless responsibility.
But that's the thing, though. Africa is so poor, and you know, just such a terrible place to live. But these colonials do not want to give up that fucking land, yo. They did not want to get that shit up, and they haven't. They haven't given it up. Like, this our shit now, forever. Not just for 2 years or 10 years or 100 years, but forever. We own this part of Africa now because we have been able to colonize the world. And we don't care what the blacks say. This is our land now. You can't have it back. Never. We like it here. We're not going back to the cold caves of Europe. We've taken Southern Africa, Northern Africa, most of Africa. The Americas, we've taken that. We've taken Australia. And we like to live in the warm parts of the world now. And you guys can't have this shit back, no matter what you do, because we have laws. We took shit by force. We called you savages. We murdered you by the thousands and executed you in genocide. And now we're going to tell you that you cannot do the same to us. You can't execute us by the millions and commit genocide against us because we have laws. And the laws say that I own this property now. And it's too bad for you guys because it's ours.
Wilson made increasingly generous offers, but Smith turned down every one. In 1971, after 6 years of UDI, the new Conservative government went even further. Smith signed a deal with Sir Alec Douglas Hume. They agreed to remove some discrimination against Africans, but leave the whites in charge of the timetable for majority rule. Smith would go on ruling the country, and Britain would be shot of it.
What do you think the Africans will think of the settlement? I think they're the happiest Africans in the world. You think they'll approve this settlement?
Really? What do you think the Africans?
But British governments had always laid down one condition. The Africans must approve the deal.
Morning.
Britain appointed a royal commission, which dispatched teams across Rhodesia to discover the Africans' opinion.
What sections of the people in Rhodesia will be represented in the parliament?
The nationalists seized their opportunity to tell the world they would never trust Smith to deliver majority rule. A moderate, Bishop Muzorewa, was picked as the respectable frontman by the nationalists who were running the campaign.
We had no money, we had no funds, we had no transport, but somehow word spread just like wildfire throughout the country. And for the first time, everybody was active, and it was no independence before majority rule, no independence before majority throughout the country.
There will be no mistake in their report that this was a very unanimous and definite no from us.
To Hume's disappointment, the commission reported the Africans turned down the deal. The nationalists had stopped Smith gaining legal independence, but were no closer to removing him. Many believed this could be done only by force. 10 years earlier, black violence had erupted, but it had been sporadic and disorganized. A group of nationalists, including Robert Mugabe, unhappy with Nkomo's leadership, broke away to form a new party, ZANU. In 1964, they declared war on the Smith regime. Both parties sent guerrilla cadres abroad for training, but for 10 years, they had little impact.
We were then in detention, and as these cadres returned from training, there was no real base within the country for them to operate. We hadn't actually prepared the people for the armed struggle. And now for them to entertain guerrillas who were armed was quite a new experience and a frightful one. And so as these cadres returned
having walked long distances from Zambia, they fell just into the hands of the security forces, and they just came to surrender.
Our intelligence was so good at that stage that we knew who was coming, where they were likely to be going. We frequently knew the dates in advance and the place of crossing. We accounted for any number of groups in that period. Some disappeared without trace because that was the nature of the terrorist war at that stage. Our success rate was as near as damn it 100%.
The villagers believed the guerrillas had little chance against the superior forces of the Smith regime and frequently informed on them. The ZANU leadership realized they needed to change tactics. They turned to the teachings of Mao Zedong.
The Chinese instructors in the various camps in Tanzania were educating and instructing our cadres and using the Maoist approach that you must use the people. And amongst the people, you are like a fish in water. Outside the people, without them, you're like a fish outside water.
ZANU would come at dusk and require the villagers to attend meetings lasting through the night. Mixing entertainment with politics, they taught the people that if they closed ranks behind the fighters, the Smith regime could be defeated.
The major message we were bringing to the people was, now we want our country. We are no more politicians who speak by the word of mouth. We are people who want to fight for our country and get it back through the barrel of the gun, as it was got from us.
Our sources of information began to dry up. A new pattern emerged. We were reacting to guerrilla activity more than in a position to preempt it or do something about it in advance.
The Rhodesians were taken by surprise when just before Christmas 1972, the guerrillas launched a series of attacks on isolated farms. Over the next 5 years, the war spread throughout the country as thousands of guerrillas infiltrated. Rhodesia had been protected by its white neighbors, South Africa and Mozambique, leaving Zambia the guerrillas' only route in. When the Portuguese left Mozambique, the whole of Rhodesia became vulnerable to attack from the east. With Nkomo's forces still infiltrating from Zambia and Mugabe's now coming from Mozambique, the Rhodesian security forces had over 1,000 miles of border to guard. They could no longer stop the guerrillas coming. The guerrillas would strike without warning, only to vanish afterwards among the local people. Using anti-terrorist techniques learned fighting with the British in Malaya and Kenya, the Rhodesian security forces hit hard at villages suspected of sheltering guerrillas. The black population was caught between the demands of the security forces for information and the guerrillas' retribution if they talked.
We don't think Rhodesia's about to collapse.
No, I don't think so at all. I don't know why we should think that at all. We've had no indication that there's going to be any fear of Rhodesia collapsing.
What about the war that's going on? Don't you notice the war?
Yes, I've got a son in the war.
But doesn't that make a difference to you?
No, I don't like the war. It's the one part I don't like, but it's essential.
It's essential to keep this land from these black people.
No, and that we will lose.
We gotta go to war. take their land.
Propaganda in the
You're not going to let them have it back.
It probably wasn't fully enough appreciated by the bulk of the whites that we had now moved into that not only no-win situation, but losing situation.
The guerrilla war had accomplished what British diplomacy had failed to. The Smith regime was now ready to bring blacks into government, but not Mugabe. Released from detention, he fled across the border to ZANU's guerrilla base in Mozambique and joined forces with Nkomo in an uneasy alliance called the Patriotic Front. Ian Smith looked for a moderate black leader inside the country.
We started negotiating with the internal black people as a result of a suggestion put to me by Alec Douglas Hume. He said, can't you get together with some of your internal blacks? Because if you can make a solution which clearly indicates that the blacks are in, and in fact that the blacks are in the majority, he said, I believe the whole world will have to accept that.
Smith tried a clever trick. He agreed to form a government with a majority of black ministers, thus securing Bishop Muzorewa as his frontman. But he ensured that real power stayed with the whites by keeping the civil service and security forces firmly in white hands. Smith and Muzorewa argued that with a black government in office, there was no reason for the guerrillas to keep fighting, and the world should accept Rhodesia's independence as legitimate.
I'm thinking that independence Salisbury is
There is no independence in Salisbury, and you know it. That is irrelevant to us. If you didn't know that, know it now.
I know.
That is irrelevant.
I know that's your argument.
We are fighting to get the transfer of power. If the 2 or 3 chaps decide to join Smith, they become part and parcel of the regime against which we are fighting. And it doesn't matter whether that regime has got black or white face. That's not what we are fighting. We're not fighting against Smith because he's a white man. We're fighting against Smith because his regime is unacceptable. It is a fascist regime, it is a racist regime, and that's all there is to it.
The guerrillas responded to the call to lay down their arms by bringing the war to the heart of Salisbury. They ignited Rhodesia's largest petrol depot, destroying millions of gallons of fuel. Smith's scheme to end the war had failed.
This is Voice of Zimbabwe, Rhodesia. The time is 9 o'clock.
In Rhodesia, the illegal regime had adopted the name Zimbabwe Rhodesia. In April 1979, Smith held the country's first majority rule election. Bishop Muzorewa succeeded him as prime minister, but the regime remained an international outcast. They had only one hope left. 2 weeks after Muzorewa, Mrs. Thatcher won her election. If she recognized Muzorewa's government, Rhodesia would be legally independent.
No one questions that there is a majority of black Rhodesians in Parliament, a majority of black ministers in the cabinet, and a black prime minister. Now, starting from that basis, we believe that there is a possibility of getting some agreement on going forward. And I would say this very, very firmly. Unfortunately, there is still terrorism operating. But we must make certain that the bullet does not beat the ballot.
Mrs. Thatcher seemed set on recognizing the Muzorewa regime, but her foreign secretary was not enthusiastic.
In my judgment, that would have been really disastrous. I mean, I don't think we'd have been driven to it, but what would have happened would be that the war would have intensified. I think you would have found that the Soviet Union would have become infinitely more involved, and I think the Commonwealth would have broken up. I think there might very well have been sanctions against Britain in the United Nations. We shouldn't have had a friend in Europe. I mean, it's idle to deny that there were differences of opinion in the Conservative Party about what the right thing to do was. So it took a bit of time to get ourselves sorted out.
3 months after the election, at the Commonwealth Summit in Lusaka, Britain announced that after years on the sidelines, she was going to take centre stage. Mrs. Thatcher backed away from recognizing the Muzorewa government. Instead, she offered the Patriotic Front guerrillas, whom previously she had labelled terrorists, an equal place with the Muzorewa government at a conference in London. Mrs. Thatcher's U-turn infuriated the Conservative right wing. They mobilised for attack at the annual party conference in Blackpool.
I must say, I went up to Blackpool. There's a certain amount of trepidation. You know, hand carrying some banners round the and the hall filled up all during lunch. There wasn't a seat to be had. Everybody forecast there was going to be blood on the floor, and it was going to be mine.
We all want peace in Rhodesia, but not peace at any price. The Conservative Party cannot weigh the pro-Soviet, totalitarian, terrorist Patriotic Front in the same scale as the pro-Western, pro-democratic government of Bishop Muzorewa. I ask you to face the facts. So long as the British government supports sanctions and continues sanctions, we are supporting the Patriotic Front, and we are supporting the drive of Soviet imperialism in Africa.
Think what it would mean if we threw over the chance of a settlement at this stage. I believe that the government were right to try to get a settlement. Were right, even at this 11th hour, to seek to get the parties together. Were right to get the backing of the Commonwealth. Were right to take this chance, once and for all, of ending the war. I give you my word that it will not be the fault of this government if we fail.
Lord Carrington and Mrs. Thatcher carried their party, but their biggest problem still remained. When the Lancaster House Conference opened on the 10th of September 1979, the Rhodesian War came to London. With diplomacy their only weapon, the British hoped they could bluff each side into believing it would form the government of independent Zimbabwe. Bishop Muzorewa came to Lancaster House because it was his only way to win legal recognition. It was not clear he was in charge of his team. His colleague, Ian Smith, had outwitted the British before. The Rhodesians hoped the PF would walk out, leaving Carrington no option but to settle with them. Patriotic Front leader Joshua Nkomo hoped a deal could be reached, leading to fresh elections, which he believed he would win. He was reluctantly accompanied by his partner Robert Mugabe, who thought victory in war more likely than the conference to bring his party to power.
Our position is that we are the genuine and authentic representatives of the people of Zimbabwe. And we haven't acquired that title by some monkey tricks. It's been by dying in battle. And we have that obligation. Some of us see mass graves as we sit in that conference.
Everybody viewed it, the conference, with the greatest possible distrust. I mean, and me. I hated every minute of it. It was an appalling, nerve-wracking business, because the consequences of it going wrong, I mean, not just for the people who were fighting the war, not just because of that, but I mean the consequences to Britain and British policy were really rather frightening.
Carrington wanted a British governor in charge while new elections were held. But first, he had to get Muzorewa to stand down.
The bishop had sent for me sometime after midnight. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, I think, that I arrived to find him in his bedroom in what I would describe as a prayerful mode. Fortunately, he didn't ask me to get down and pray with him, though he had done on other occasions. He was worried that, as he put it, he was on the horns of a dilemma. whether to accept now what the British were proposing, which was in effect that he should stand down as Prime Minister and accept a British governor during the elections. We discussed it, and neither of us could think of any precedent in the history of Africa where any African leader had relinquished power and ever been able to recover it.
Well, to be honest and frank, I did not like it, thinking humanly, but after some thought and prayer overnight, I decided to step down.
Bishop Muzorewa told us that he had made the decision based on political intelligence and his own understanding of what the British had in mind for him and for the country, that he was looking to the Foreign Office in Britain and to God to see him right, which perhaps was expecting a little bit too much from two such unlikely collaborators.
I could see through the Lancaster House agreement early on. I remember telling them, Carrington as well, that that constitution they were trying to sell us would give us a PF government. At that time, remember, Mugabe and Nkomo were together. They accused me of being an alarmist. This was the talk in the corridors. I remember Lord Carrington saying to me, "But my dear Mr. Smith, the whole thing has been planned to ensure that that will not take place."
Smith, unable to persuade the Salisbury delegation to heed his warning, left for home. He was succeeded as the figure the White Rhodesians relied on to safeguard their interests by General Walls. Suspicious of Foreign Office assurances, he sought a meeting with Mrs. Thatcher.
She said certain things to me which made me think that the kind of political solution for which we had always hoped, non-racial, multi-interest, anti-Marxist, that kind of political solution was going to triumph. And unhappy though we may have been, one had to accept those assurances that that was the general flow, the way it was going to work.
Having secured the Salisbury delegation's agreement, Carrington tried to make the PF follow suit.
This evening, Lord Carrington pretended that all had been well, pretended that there had been progress. As far as the Patriotic Front is concerned, there have not been discussions at all with anybody.
Everybody's like,
in respect of the substantive matters regarding the ceasefire.
Yes.
And we insist that there can never be any agreement. This is just rubbish, absolute rubbish. Nobody will take cognizance of it.
And I thought you were going to send me some pictures, man.
Of the British proposals, I believe there's a way open for a fairly quick return to normality as far as the political scene is concerned.
But with or without the Patriotic Front?
With or without the Patriotic Front. Thank you, you've answered it. I don't care.
But if the front doesn't come in, General, the war will go on.
That's right. And then the front will be demolished.
I swear that fucking glare just
With the conference still in progress,
every
the
time.
Rhodesian security forces launched an all-out assault. They unleashed destruction on both Zambia and Mozambique in a final attempt to demolish the Patriotic Front.
They carried out
PlayStation.
all the way down the Limpopo Valley, very nearly to the capital of Mozambique.
Don't talk to me like that,
The military
PlayStation.
temperature was rising all the time, and unless we did something fast to bring things to a conclusion, everything that had been gained in the conference would be thrown away.
Yeah, this is going to be dope. I'm doing another picture of this same couple, and I'm talking to them about actually getting some more photographs. I might just do a whole series of this couple, yo, because their photographs are the fucking shit. Like the concepts they come up with, yo, is like dope as fuck, yo. I really feel it. So, my man 93 Until and his girlfriend Wheat Bread. Y'all can follow them on Instagram, yo. They come up with some beautiful images, real fucking hood shit, yo. The Titty series. Yeah, and this is the next one I'm gonna do of them. That shit right there gonna be fresh as hell when it's finished, yo. I already know that's gonna be too fresh. Yo, man, it's still. That's gonna be a fresh one. I already drew one picture of them in my sketch pad. And then I got some other stuff. Hold up, guys.
And it will be all out war with the British government in place.
The final session of the conference ended in failure. Mugabe, not trusting the British, raised objections. He believed that if he continued the war, he would eventually win in the
Bacon. Man, as you know, I've been up since 3:30, man. My day been started. Oh, shit. But yeah, so I got this piece. I have this piece. I got two pieces that aren't even, they don't have any color at all on it yet. So this is going to be another nude that I'm working on. I'll get started on that in a couple days, I think. Oh shit. Here's another canvas that doesn't have any paint on it yet. And then I still have to finish this piece right here. This one is almost done though. Just a little bit more to go on this piece. Then that's gonna be the shit. Matter of fact, I have gotten to a stopping point on this one. This is as far as I can go right now, so I need to let this dry. And so while this layer of paint is drying, I am gonna finish this other piece up. Take this off the easel. You have somewhere to put it. That shit right there gonna be fresh as shit, yeah. That shit nice. Yeah, so I can finish this one. This one is gonna be a real pretty one too. Just one more layer of paint to go on here. Some highlights on their face, a little bit on their shoulders and chest, a little more highlights in her hair, in their jeans. I'll wrap that up. Put the old Travis Prince signature on there. Call it a day. You know? Oh man. I have been up for a while, guys. I think I'm just gonna chill for a minute. I need to make some phone calls and check some messages and stuff. So stay posted. Yeah, if this is your first time in my stream, you know that's what I look for, man. I gotta get them details in there, man. Bring that shit to life. You know what I'm saying? All the way down to the eyelashes. But if this is your first time in the stream on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button so you can always check out my art. And hit the bell for notifications so you know as soon as I come in here and turn on the cameras and everything, and stay updated with the current projects I'm working on. Also, you can follow me on all my social media sites at Paintings by the Prince. I'm on everything underneath the same title, Paintings by the Prince. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Tumblr, DeviantArt, and there's some other stuff I have. I think I might get Snapchat and some other shit, but I don't really know what the fuck that's for. And other than that, you know what I'm saying? That's about all I got for you. Remember, guys, always work towards your own dreams. If you're not working towards your own dreams, you're working towards somebody else's, and that does you no good at all. So always work towards your own dreams. Focus on your own dreams, because your own dreams are important. You need to invest in yourself. If you got any kind of talent, man, cultivate your talent. Practice, 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 practice until you have mastered your talent. And once you have mastered your talent, figure out a way to make money off of it. And that's living the dream. Being able to earn money doing something you actually enjoy doing anyway. But in order for any of that to happen, you got to keep a positive attitude, and you got to stay around positive, forward-thinking, goal-orientated people. If you're around a bunch of negative, bum-ass slackers, that's the same kind of person you're going to be. Always surround yourself with movers and shakers with a positive attitude and a positive outlook on life, because negativity is contagious. So stay away from negative people. If you can't find a good group of positive people, man, you just got to motivate yourself sometimes. I do it a lot, you know. Plus, with you guys' help, you know, you guys are some of my biggest motivations, some of my biggest inspirations, and I truly love it. So, remember, guys, what is it again? All right, chase your dreams, invest in yourself, master your crafts, turn it into a business. Always think positive, put positive energy out, stay away from negativity. Don't smoke cigarettes, and don't take wooden nickels from strangers. Okay, that's all the advice I have for today. But definitely, if you subscribe and hit the bell button, I'll be back in here later on. So peace. Until next time.